We are back. I don't know what happened. Something terrible happened, they tell me. But today, we have the great Bob Mould here. I am going to invite him in to the show. And we are going to start this sucker again. For many of you, you might not know it. There he is. He's coming.
Yay!
All right, so I noticed, because I'm very good at this, I noticed at the top of the screen there were like 60 people on, and that is very out of character for us. And so, as you can see, we have a regular group of people.
Yeah.
So folks, I'm Geoff Edgers from the Washington Post. As you know, every Friday I do this, and we're lucky enough to have Bob Mould here. He's already heard me introduce him, but I'm going to do it again because I don't think anyone else did. The quick introduction is Bob in the 80s. We knew him from his famed group Husker Du. That dissolved. He became a solo artist, which is how I learned about him. And then he formed the band Sugar in the 90s, an amazing rock band, and has continued making music over the years. His 14th record is out now, and we have it right here. Blue Hearts. I played a little of it. I know it's backwards here, but it's a very, I would say, dark. I mean, to use the word dark with your music would be maybe, it's all on a scale, but it feels like right now.
Definitely.
And we were listening to a song when we started the show called American Crisis.
Yep.
And I want you to tell me about the roots of that song. It feels like you wrote it last week, but I know you didn't.
I know, yeah. So American Crisis was written in April of 2018 when I was living in Berlin, Germany. And it's one of those songs where I just started writing, and 5 minutes later I looked down and I had all these words, and I was like, oh, that's good enough. Ostensibly it was written to be on the previous album, Sunshine Rock, that came out in the middle of last year. The two albums before Sunshine Rock were both really dark. I lost my dad and wrote about that. I lost my mom and wrote about that. So I moved to Berlin and said, I'm going to make a happy record. Sunshine Rock. I write this song, American Crisis. It doesn't really fit. So I put it in my back pocket. And it sat there smoldering. 2019, Sunshine Rock touring. Lots of shows, lots of playing guitar, going around the world. And around a year ago, I started to get this feeling of deja vu that we can dig in a little bit deeper about how the third year of Trump was feeling a lot like the third year of Reagan. And the song American Crisis speaks about what the 1980s were like to me.
Yeah.
As a young gay man, certain of my sexuality, very unclear of my sexual identity, not sure where I fit, if there was a community, and how to get into it. So anyway, this song, we revisited the song for what became Blue Hearts. We recorded the album in February. It was done and dusted by March 1st. We started putting the campaign in place for the record. And in mid-April, we chose American Crisis to be the first track. Made a lyric video for it with a little bit of performance, and it was supposed to be dropped on June 1st. It was just a Monday. And, my publicist said to me, oh my gosh, they're going to re-announce Record Store Day on June 1st. We're going to get overwhelmed. Why don't we move it to June 3rd, the Wednesday? And I thought, yeah, whatever, 2 days, no problem. And of course, June 1st was the Bible walk, right? And I'm just, and this is after, Breonna Taylor and after George Floyd. And then we get the Bible walk, and I'm like, you can't write this stuff. Like, what am I supposed to do with this now?
But, the thing that's amazing, about your work, and I can think of a handful of other artists in this way, is you can write a song about in any moment, and it appears, and suddenly it's applicable to the moment that's just occurred. Does that make some sense?
Yeah. It's the tea leaves. It's the magic 8 ball. Yes, no, I don't know. I think our job you know, as journalists, as writers, as artists or whatever, is you just write what you know. You know, you sort of take in the world around you. And I mean, a lot of topics are timeless. That song, I was sort of like, how did that happen? And it was just, you know, I guess the short answer is it's about the 1980s. It's about me as, you know, a 17-year-old kid growing up in a farm town in northern New York State, you know, where there were no people of color. Everybody was the same. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. I was very lucky to get an underprivileged scholarship to go to Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Immediately, it was a whole new world of many, you know, races and creeds and cultures and identities. And I had to get up to speed real fast. I got in a band. I was gay. There was Reagan. I grew up around Reagan youth, 1978 at Macalester. Kids with ties and briefcases. You know, I mean, I saw all this before. You know, so
I mean, people don't really. I mean, and you've referenced being gay, but I mean, the fact is, you know, we live at a time where people are far more comfortable exploring whatever identity they have, whatever their sexuality is, whatever their orientation. It's a different world. In the 1980s in Norman, it was, I'm sorry, in Malone, it was not a comfortable thing for a kid, right?
No, not when I was growing up. I mean, I had no role models. There were whispers about somebody being gay. There was whispers about a kid that got killed because he was gay. And, you know, I was just like, okay, I'm going to go to the city. You know, I'm going to go to, you know, I have to move now. I think I'm a bright guy. Maybe there's a place for me somewhere out in the world. And, you know, going to St. Paul was wonderful. It was a great opportunity. You know, it's where I met Grant Hart. It's where I met Greg Norton. We started Husker Du. And, you know, I think to sort of frame a couple different things for people, you know, as far as late 70s gay culture, I mean, you know, I don't remember a whole lot of musical role models. You know, I mean, Elton John was bisexual. You know, David Bowie was bisexual. You know, Jabriath I didn't know about until later. You know, people like Tom Robinson and Jimmy Somerville over the late 70s and early 80s over time, people who, you know, were very political about being gay in their work. But, you know, I was in this band, punk rock band. We were trying to just, you know, amuse ourselves. You know, music at that time was, you know, very exclusive, very, very much, you know, private jets and cocaine and groupies and all that. And, you know, Husker Du, we were three pretty average looking guys from St. Paul, you know, and we had to figure out where our place was. And, you know, we spent a number of years befriending other bands when they would come on tour, you know, bands like the Dead Kennedys or Black Flag or DOA, you know, and we would become friends with them, and they helped us out in the early 80s. And we went out and we became, you know, part of this community of alternative music and underground musicians. And we were sort of building this world of our own because there was no place for us in that exclusive jet-setting cocaine world.
Right. Now, and I just have to share with you, I mentioned one of our great investigative editors, really one of the best in the country, is David Fallis. You heard of him? You know him? Remember him? No. He was in a band called No Direction in Oklahoma, and he actually took photos of you, and this is a photo he took of you in 1982, I guess.
Yep. That could be a place called the Crystal Pistol.
I think that was actually, I asked him what it was. He took another picture of you at the Crystal Pistol, but that was actually the Armory.
Okay, this was the Armory. Oh my gosh, I wonder if that was the '85 show or 1984 where we played one note for an hour. I wonder if it was that show.
Could have been. That could have been. And I do remember. I do think he mentioned something about it. Did you play like something off Zen Arcade just for like a straight hour?
Yep. Yeah. It was like an E, like an octave E for about an hour.
It's like Andy Kaufman reading all of The Great Gatsby, right?
Yes. But the show. Why I mentioned the Crystal Pistol in Tulsa is I remember the first time Husker Du played there, someone rode a horse into the club, like onto the dance floor.
You wrote about that, right?
So like what? But I mean, so I mean, in the late '70s, early '80s, that's what music looked like to me. And in the early 80s, as you know, as a gay kid, certain that I was attracted to other men, but not feeling connected to any kind of community or having any kind of role models. You know, and then Reagan, then the moral majority, the evangelicals, all of the backing and support they gave him to put him in power. And then those number of years where his administration could never say the word AIDS. And, you know, as a kid, that stuff really, you know, I remember being here where I live in San Francisco in the summer of 1981 when, you know, they started posting things on the wall at Star Pharmacy, you know, at 18th and Castro, which is now my you know, formula chain drugstore. It was weird. I just didn't know how to process any of it. I mean, you know, the hardcore punk scene at the time was very inclusive. You know, I mean, all of us misfits had a place, but I wasn't grabbing a sexual identity at that time.
I mean,
you know,
the only in our culture, if I remember right, in our culture, the big turning point, as sad as it is when Rock Hudson died, and
yep.
suddenly Ronald Reagan was comfortable, or as comfortable as he could have been, acknowledging AIDS, because that had been one of his buddies in Hollywood in the 50s, right?
Yeah. So it took all that time until it actually came home to him for him to recognize the severity of this.
Which is that's 1985. And then Bob, you also, and I just want to recommend to people, because I'm in the plugging mood, your book, which is just a beautiful piece of art, but also everything you would want to understand about a time period and a way of thinking and a way of growing. But your book, you talk about this. I mean, you really ultimately didn't come out until like 1994, right? I mean,
yeah, 94 was when publicly, you know, a publication called Spin magazine, big music paper in the 90s, and then still, you know, a good source for music. They came to me wanting to do the story, you know, we could, you know, you can come out, or we can bring you out, or we can do this thing. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, let's do it. Let's talk about it. And there was a writer named Dennis Cooper's novelist, came down to Austin, Texas, spent a couple days in my home with me and my then partner, and had a really good time and just talked and joked about things. But even then, I still felt like, gosh, am I now am I a gay musician, or a musician who happens to be gay, or, you know, what am I now? What am I going to be now? And I mean, ultimately, it was the beginning of coming out. It feels like it's still, you know, it's a work in progress. I think, you know, somebody asked me around National Coming Out Day, well, what did it feel like? I said, you know, it just felt like a bunch of furniture falling over. You know, I'm sort of a socially awkward guy by nature. You know, I'm a little introverted, a little, you know, a little funny. I mean, I'm good when I'm doing this, but. So, yeah, I mean, just to try to frame the whole thing for people with Blue Hearts is American Crisis being sort of the tent pole of this record that touches on a lot of subjects that are very current, you know, hypocrisy in religion, especially with evangelicals. You know, it talks about the perils of technology. You know, I'm sort of fascinated with the idea. Is this a camera? Is this a window, a mirror, a screen, this thing of glass that we use all the time? It takes on so many different roles in our life every day. And I'm always like, do we see a reflection of ourselves when it's off? Like, what is this?
You've never done Instagram Live? Are there things, sometimes people will say like, I won't do Zoom, or I won't do Instagram, or I won't, you know, but I'll do this. They have all these different. What is your thought on all this? Because I feel like we're being watched all the time anyway, right?
I feel like we're being watched all the time anyway. So I don't do Zoom because I heard all kinds of weird things early on about it, like people sort of bum rushing a conference call, or where's the data really going? I mean, you know, I guess as an old guy, I sort of figured out on the internet, like all those surveys at the beginning, you know, like, tell us all about yourself and you'll win a free prize, you know, like.
Well, you had there's a hilarious looking back at it, but I mean, you talk about in the early days of like basically meeting people online for relationships, to meet them, and going out driving, like, I don't know how far you drove, but to meet this fellow who you thought seemed like a nice enough guy, and you get out there, and you know, he had kept canceling on you because his grandmother died,
All kinds of stuff.
His car broke down, and then you get out there, and he's there. First of all, he looks nothing like on the computer, right? And then you go to his house, and his grandmother's there. And he's like, "Oh, that was my aunt," right?
Yeah. It's wonderful. The early internet was amazing, right? Really crazy stuff. And yeah, and we all get ourselves into, various levels of peril on it. But yeah, so, the record talks about technology. It talks about relationships. I mean, it's a broad-based record, but, the hot spots on the record are definitely, accidentally timely things, I guess, with politics and, the sort of the grave state of things right this moment. I mean, what'd you think of last night? Did you do
yeah, I thought it was hard to get a beat on because I watched the first debate with our son our youngest is 10, and I watched the first one with him for a while, and it was like such a train wreck that I was trying to explain to him not to pay attention, and then like, okay, time for bed. And last night just felt a little sleepy, but then I was like, maybe that's what it should be, right? The problem that I find, and the problem is that in the olden days, like, I don't know, 4 years ago, our country would argue, but it would argue about facts. They would have opinions on facts. Now the problem is we really argue about what the facts are, and it's very hard to understand what makes a fact anymore. Because sometimes, just repeating something over and over again, it sinks in and people start to believe it's true. So you're sitting there and, you can't trust any numbers anymore, right? Yeah. You can't really be sure of what people's opinions were in the past. So you have to figure out a third process of deciding who you support. I mean, I don't really like, I'm the national arts reporter. I don't like being political. I feel like my job is not to be political and everybody has an opinion. But I do feel like I've never seen things so completely broken and dysfunctional between the two sides.
Yeah, it's really disheartening. In 2016, I moved from San Francisco to Berlin, Germany, and spent 3.5 years living there, and it was an amazing experience. And it was just the little things that would happen throughout the course of the 3 years. Like sort of registering with the government, getting my residence visa and having to do paperwork down at City Hall. And, I was working on the paperwork with a friend of mine, and there was a question, and I was like, what's this question? They're like, are you religious? And they're like, be sure to put no on that. And I said, well, I said, I'm not particularly religious at the moment, but why would I put no? They're like, because if you put yes, then they ask for an extra tax.
Huh.
And what happens is they collect sort of the tithe, and then they distribute it to the various religions in Germany.
That is, I mean, who even thought of that, right?
Well, it's a good way to keep it all legitimate.
Yeah. Right. It is a good way to. But
it would be stuff like that, or even like going to get like health insurance, which was mandatory. And because I wasn't able to work because I was there as an artist, I had to buy my own insurance, and I had to buy like the premium coverage.
Yeah.
It's 1/3 of what I pay here.
Huh.
And people who are in the national system, it's maybe 1/10 of what we pay here. So that's what happens when everybody actually has to have health insurance and buy it.
You move. It's like when I read that book and just consider your life, it feels like you're always moving. Right?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
Is that you're in San Francisco now? Is that a restlessness? Is it you get tired of different places? Do different places give you inspiration, and then sort of have no, you feel like it's time to roll? I mean, it feels like you're always moving.
Yeah, I mean, it's the luxury of being self-employed and being in a business where I can live out of a suitcase or live with very minimal means and objects around me. I mean, ultimately, it's the beauty of new experiences for me. San Francisco, I've been here on and off now 10 years, which is the longest, I think. DC, I was in for 7 years before that. was wonderful city. I loved living in DC, just the whole vibe. Although it was the W years, which was a little weird. It was a little oppressive, but you know, living in New York City was wonderful. I really thrive on like new experiences and new people and just having to adjust to different ways of life. I mean, I'm a city person by nature because I grew up on the farm. I did have a farm up in Minnesota for a year and a half, and that was sort of a crazy time too.
Yeah.
1988, 89. But yeah, I think it's one of the great luxuries that I have is just being able to pick up, and it's like, oh, I wonder what it would be like to live in the desert. I wonder what it'd be like to live in, you know, a country where I don't speak the language, like Germany, and throw myself into their world, and just you learn a lot of new things that way. I guess I never got that season abroad like a lot of people did. So.
Right. I mean, you went to, and you know, I was struck that you went to Macalester for a year, because that is a very good school. I mean, you obviously were a gifted student who could have done anything you wanted to, right?
I think I was an okay student. I tested well. It was they had a quota for underprivileged kids. And so I got the underprivileged scholarship because I grew up in poverty. So that was the way in. But yeah, I mean, Mondale taught there, Humphrey taught there, Kofi Annan went there. So had a really good, you know, political science, liberal arts.
I did not. You know. I'm just going to tell you, I did not get into Macalester as much as I wanted to. I don't know what it was about Macalester, but I thought that school would be fantastic. Bob, I'm going to try something. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I know I asked you if you would perform, and I know you don't do that. You're not a jukebox. We understand that. But so I was lucky enough to get you to perform, and I just want to share this with you. You can see it, right? Yeah. Right.
What are you doing?
All right. Here we go.
Hi, it's Bob Mould. A little early for the holidays, but this is my rendition of Jingle Bells. Wow, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Hey, oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. In a one-horse.
Oh my gosh.
That's your good buddy Fred Armiston, who
what?
Yeah, that's who he is. Look, he actually
wait a minute. Oh my god, I thought that was Steve Schmidt.
He sent me that picture yesterday because he wanted you to know that he is Fred Armiston, who is the great comedian, but also is an excellent musician. He was in where are you going? You going somewhere?
Yeah, I'm going over here. I'm going to surprise you.
Fred is in a hotel in Vancouver, and I told him you were going to be on here, and he sent me that. He sent me that clip, which I think is
that's so sweet of him to do. Thank you, Fred.
And he's also he said he wanted to show you that picture because he said he's shaving the Bob beard today.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's pretty crazy.
Let's see. You picked up a guitar there? Is that what you did?
See, hey, I faked you out, didn't I?
Bob, you'll play something for us?
It's a whole new set. It's a whole new set.
It's a whole new set. I like it, and I'm gonna hold this up while you play a little bit. Okay, what are you gonna play for us? Do you take requests?
Well, I was gonna show. It's like a sort of I'm a very private person. I would never normally do something like this, but I know this is a big deal for me and for everybody. So I thought I would show you where I do my work. This is sort of where I set up and do all of my writing. It's my little rural getaway in the middle of San Francisco. And I don't know. So, I mean, we were talking when you mentioned songwriting before. I was, sort of going to talk about that a little bit, just in the terms of like people say, well, how do you write a song? Like, I've got friends that are like, I want to be a songwriter. How do I write songs? Like, everything I write is so, it's just like, you have to write what you know. You have to sort of, just call on your experiences. And for me as a songwriter, how I look at this process, and I try to explain this to people, is I'm the guy with the bucket. And when it starts to rain, I go outside and I catch the water. And when the bucket is full, I bring the bucket back in and I set it down. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I might drink it. I might wash my car with it. I might water some plants with it. But the thing about writing is you just have to, when it starts to rain, you got to get out and you have to, you catch the moments, right? And you hold on to them. And then later on, you figure it out. It's like songwriting is this multi-step process. You know, I mean, you write, right? And when you're just writing, you don't like, oh, I got to stop and edit that.
Well, I think that the problem is that the biggest barrier for me as a writer is lowering my standards and accepting that sometimes I write badly. And if I can do that, then I can soldier through it, and I don't sit there going, oh, I've got writer's block. I don't believe there's writer's block. There's just bad writing. Or not applying oneself to the craft on a regular basis. Because if you don't have the tools, how can you do your work? So you got to have your stuff handy all the time. But anyways, so I was going to show people, there's a song on the record called Forecast of Rain. And like a lot of times when I'm writing at home, I do these things with, where I'm using like sort of drum machines and, you know, fake strings and stuff. So, I'll have a song and it'll have parts in it that, you're like, oh. So I do all these like crazy little things that you can never hear on the records because the guitars are so loud. So I'm gonna do my jukebox thing for you. I'd love. Oh my god, sure.
Can I do a thing? And I just play a song and sort of play along with my demo track.
Do it up. I'd love to hear
That'll
it. Yeah.
be cool. I think it'll probably work. Let me see. I may have it too loud. Let me see. That's about right. So then you do these things and you give them to other people. Almighty Spirit, so high upon your holy throne. I have a question so simple to answer, won't take long. Is love thy neighbor, they does it apply to all mankind. Oh, holy knows it inside your narrow eyes. Why see your sheep there, straying from the field, they're heading to the sea. I hope you capture them, well before the flood, well filled with blood. While the earth is burning, there's a rapture in the sky, and the cliffs can fly. What will we do? A forecast of rain, a 40 days of rain. Could this be blasphemy? When you're a star, you can do what you want. Words on the skyline, buildings will fall, you'll pay for it all. My truth is different than your distortions and disguise. Interpretations, twisting the words of ancient times. Why in the thunder, what will we do today with a forecast of rain? Why in the lightning I trace across the sky, a voltage passing by. Why in the vapor that comes in from the bay, it wraps around our bay. What will we do? A forecast of rain, a forecast of rain. So anyway, so that's sort of how the thing works.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's sort of cool, right? So it's just, so when I do these things when I'm writing, I just sort of put down a little drum machine, put down a click track, start writing some stuff. And then when I get these sort of in a shape, I send these to John Worster, my drummer, Jason Narducci, my bass player, and say, okay, here's the thing. It's one of these, it's a 6.5, 13 bar verse, 13 bar chorus, you know, and this is the structure, and do whatever you want with it.
Do you I mean, you've done both over the years, but obviously this new record is it's a band record. It sounds like a band record. It feels like a band record. Do you how do you decide, look, I think I can do all this stuff in my home studio. I'm going to use some of these electronic instruments. I'm going to just craft it my own way. And how do you decide this is a band record? This is what I want it to sound like?
Well, I mean, I went through a period in the 2000s where I was making records backwards, where I would put drums on last. You know, I do everything sort of at home, and then put drums in. With something like Blue Hearts, I mean, this is a built for the stage sort of punk rock record, and you know, a lot of times it's the material. You know, I mean, when you listen to this record, you can hear the three of us in the room bashing this stuff out. You know, it's like very, 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 very physical, and you know, subject matter had a lot to do with it. But I mean, there's all different ways to make these records. You know, it's
Bob, does it bug you when you read? I don't know if you even read these things, but like, so a record like this, people say, oh, it's his most Husker Du like since 1986. You know those comparisons, right? Anytime you put an electric guitar on there, they're going to do that sort of thing. Was there a period of time you shied away from trying to sound like that band? And is there a kind of like piece you're at with those comparisons now?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest break was 1988 when I left Husker Du, and that was, you know, I mean, the band was going to end. It was just a matter of who said I'm out first, and I sort of said, oh, I'll leave. And for the year and a half following that, between leaving Husker Du and releasing Workbook, my first solo album, was a real conscious effort not to be that guy. Like, why would I leave a band as well known and revered as Husker Du was, just to have another record that sounds just like it? What'd you just grab?
So it's this set. I want to talk about this because
that's where Bob, it starts.
It's kind of amazing. I don't really so I'll just tell you, I mean, I'm 49, and I was too young to go see Husker Du play. I mean, I guess I could have snuck in, but I was just some kid in the suburbs. So for me, the entry point to you was, in the olden days, I don't know if kids realize this, but you would read Rolling Stone and you'd be like, oh my God, they said that's 4 stars. And I'd say, I got to get that. And I got this book, this album, Workbook, which it's very hard to see. The real cover is this sort of Joseph Cornell lightbox, which is quite beautiful. But I remember putting this record on, and it was one of the most beautiful records I'd ever heard, because you opened it up with like a finger-picking song, Sunspots, and you had songs that really went from melancholic, acoustic to dark, and I hadn't heard things like that in my life. And this is, just so people know, this just came out, I think it came out today. This is the first vinyl version of this new retrospective, which, I mean, this is like, you couldn't find something better. Goes from Workbook to Black Sheets of Rain, your 2 first solo records. It's got all the Sugar records on there, and then some B-sides, and so it's just beautiful. So
yeah.
Did you pick that sucker up, the blue guitar, right?
There it is. It stays at home now. Look at that. Somebody dropped it, that big chunk. Somebody dropped it. Somebody dropped it again. There's a big split and seam there. Fretboard's completely destroyed. But you don't change these things, right? So
you still use that guitar, right?
Only at home.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you went. I just am curious if you could just explain to people. You go from being in this, like, you know, punk rock band that is just the definition of thrashing and also melodic. I mean, let's be fair, but you go into this farmhouse in Minnesota and reinvent yourself. What is going on there? Tell me how you do that.
Well, it was just sort of denying my own natural language as a musician. You know, I started working a lot with keyboards, I mean, there were like, I've got like hours and hours of like orchestral music that I was trying to write. I mean, I was trying to, you know, I was doing weird stuff like covering Petula Clark's Sign of the Times with synthesizers. You know, I mean, you know, I was making stuff that sounded like, I guess, industrial music.
Hmm.
And then I started listening to a lot of world music. I had a friend who worked at Nonesuch, and they sent me boxes of all this, Celtic music, Galax, Virginia, Appalachian, bluegrass, and all these musics with sort of drones and modalities that started to shape the way that I was looking at my writing. I was writing a lot of short stories and poetry. And then the way that I was folding words and music together was completely different than anything I had done before. I would just start improvising on a guitar with words and just reading certain lines. And then all of a sudden I got Wishing Well. I'm like, oh, well, that happened nice. So
Wishing
it was,
Well, that's an example of a song that just goes from, there's something so dark about that song and beautiful. I mean, most of us heard See a Little Light was one of must be your biggest solo hit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, the song, the book, the movie. Yeah. It's the title that gets repurposed.
Yeah. I mean, that record really opened it up. And Bob, I have to ask you, I remember I saw Sugar in the early 90s, and I had a backstage pass because I was like at some newspaper at that time. I was very young. And I remember I was with a friend and they were like, let's go back. And I can't tell you how, first of all, I did not. I watched you on stage, and I've got to be honest, I was terrified of meeting you. You looked like one of the most, it looked like you would bite my head off.
Good.
And I mean, I know from reading your book, and I know from talking with you, you're a sweet person and very introspective, but would that guy have bitten my head off? What goes on when you're on that stage with that guitar?
When I'm on the stage with the guitar, I really have no idea. I mean, there's that thing about minutes before the show, sort of taking my tea, doing my stretching, double knot everything, move your belt over out of the way of your guitar so you don't scratch up the finish. And then you're doing your warm-ups, your calisthenics, you're stretching, you're doing your stuff, and then you're standing right on the edge of the light. And then the light goes down, and the other lights come up, and you walk out there. And when I make that transition, I really don't have much of a handle on the person that steps on the stage. It's pretty visceral. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I really don't understand it.
You've decided over the, I mean, at one point, I think in 98-ish or something, you were like, I'm not doing any more electric band stuff. Yep. I know that you have physically injured yourself. You've made yourself sick physically from performance, right?
Yeah, I've done a lot of things. Yeah, yelling and screaming and busting blood vessels and losing my voice, and I mean that all that kind of stuff. Yeah. 1998, what happened was it was about 20 years into my career, and going back to sort of my lack of a true sexual identity. I moved back to New York City and was spending a lot of time in the West Village and in Chelsea, which were the gay neighborhoods at that time, and I really wanted to not just be the rock guitar guy who lives in the van and tours all over the world. As amazing as that is, I was like, I'm almost 40. I sort of want to hang out with the gay guys. I want to go to the gym and start looking better and feeling better and see if I can, sort of get this identity for myself. And that was the reason I put down the guitar.
Bob, I have do you have time for a quiz?
Yeah, sure.
All right, look, I'm going to show you a few guys, and I want you to identify them, okay? Can you do this for me?
Iron Sheik.
Okay.
Nikolai Volkov. Oh my gosh, it's xenophobic WWF heels from the early 80s. Captain Lou.
That's easy. And then, of course...
Hulk. I know.
Oh, what was that?
I know.
For God's sakes, Bob. I don't know if people know.
If I had a second phone, I'd call him right now.
I don't think people realize this, but you were creative consultant basically. Mm-hmm. And what was it for the WCW?
Yeah, it was a company called WCW. Originally, that was like the National Wrestling Alliance, which was like a worldwide company like WWE is now, back through the 20th century. And then they got bought by Ted Turner, became World Championship Wrestling. I had lifelong fan of the business, student of the business. I had friends in the business. And I got a call in September of '99. They asked me and said, "Oh, the executive vice president's going on hiatus. Do you want to come in as the creative consultant for the company?" I was like, "You sure about this?" And they said, "Yeah, we want your opinions. We want your ideas." So I got in. I flew down to Atlanta and very quickly learned everything that I didn't know about professional wrestling, which was a lot, even though I thought I knew a lot. And it's a crazy world. It's a crazy world.
You were actually, I mean, you were on steroids for a while, right? I mean, you were like in the world of wrestling, taking steroids, going up to Hulk Hogan and giving him storylines.
I tried.
I mean, your title was consultant, but you were running the show.
Yeah. So there's a job. It's called there's a thing in wrestling called the gorilla position, and there was a WWF wrestler, Gorilla Monsoon, who was sort of the guy who kept the show running on time. In the old days, before wireless earpieces, they used to send somebody down to ringside to fluff their tie, which was like, "Okay, you guys, 2 more minutes and you're done. Go to your predetermined finish." But Gorilla, in WWE, Vince McMahon sits at Gorilla on the headset, watching the time code, telling the refs to tell the guys, and blah, 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 blah. So I got put in that position because I was good with math, so it was because I could watch the time code and hit our commercial breaks right. So, and I could do all that on the fly, and I could remember all the stories and remember the blocking and how to cue everybody. And it was pretty nuts. It was pretty crazy. Yeah.
What you're telling me is this is not, wrestling is not real?
No, everything, it's all real. It's predetermined, it's choreographed, it's cooperative. It's and the things that people like, the little things about pro wrestling that are really crazy are like when you watch it and the blood feuds where people are literally killing each other for real, they're best friends. It's the ones where it's because in that environment, those guys have to absolutely trust each other with their lives and their bodies. Because, I mean, what happens if you're really mad at somebody and you've got them up and you go, "Oh, I'll just drop you on your head instead"? So
what can you tell us about this guy? You talked to Hulk?
Hulk, yeah. Oh yeah, I'd be sitting at Gorilla, and he'd be coming up next, and I'd just feel the two, "Brother Bob."
Yeah. It's so amazing to me.
Hey, Hulk, it's top to bottom, 12 minutes. How much go home do you need? 3 minutes.
I'm going to ask you,
okay.
Bob, I'm going to give you a few questions. I'm going to see fans have written in here, and
okay.
I'm going to self-edit them. So
right.
if they're good, I don't know if they're going to be good. Right. Let's see. So far, these questions are not so good. They're kind of, let's see. What program do you use when you're making your music on the computer? Someone wants to know.
I use 3 different programs. I use I use Mark of the Unicorn Digital Performer as my multi-track. I use Propellerhead's Reason as my synth bank, and I use Ableton Live for looping and time correcting. So 3 different packages.
Okay, someone is asking, this person, Renato, is asking, any chances of you ever releasing a folk album in the vein of Workbook?
Anything can happen. I mean, if I'm lucky enough to make more records, that might be, it's a good possibility.
Bob, with Husker Du, obviously Grant Hart is no longer alive. You're pretty unflinchingly don't look back at that band in a way that you wanted, we've seen everybody except for maybe the Kinks go back and perform again. I assume you were offered huge chunks of money over the years to put that band together again, right?
There were 1 or 2 occasions where people had made nice gestures to try to get the band back together. Yeah.
I assume you do not regret at all not doing that, considering how it ended and what legacy you left there.
Yeah, not so much the former, but much more the latter. When a band like Husker Du that was so, to me, really an amazing band, and so of a period in time, speaking to a period in time, and so many people think so highly of that band. Why would anybody in their right mind take a chance in changing that legacy by doing something that looks less than what people remember?
Yeah, I hear you. It's very rare that a band comes back and can do it the way that you want them to, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and that was a great band, and you know, the three of us did a lot of good. I think we did a lot of good for the world of music. You know, I as a kid and even today, I really do believe that music can change the world, and that's, you know, we sort of fell into that spot in the 80s, and you know, really helped a lot of our friends, helped build a completely different world of music that, you know, a lot of people years after, I guess Nirvana and Pixies being the two that I think of right away, you know, really took that template and that methodology and those ideas and really took it to the mainstream. And then it's, you know, it's sort of been a, you know, sort of a pillar of music now. And why would I mess with that?
I saw the David Byrne show, American Utopia, last year a couple times. You see that show?
No, I know about it, but I have not seen it yet.
And I was too young for Talking Heads, so I was like, I always thought, oh, it'd be so cool to see them. And then you watch him play with his band, and they're amazing musicians. Mm-hmm. And you watch them after the show, and you watch them hanging out, and you realize, and they like each other. So why would you want to go back and do it again? And I think about your band now. Those guys they got to be the best musicians you play. I mean, you know, you don't want to slight anyone, but those two guys have to be right up there with the best you've played with.
Yeah, John Worster, Jason Narducci. I mean, it's so much of what made these 5 records with Merge, you know, from Silver Age, Beauty and Maroon, Patch the Sky, Sunshine Rock, and now Blue Hearts. I mean, it's the fact that we all love music, we get along great, we speak the same language of music, we all grew up roughly in the same era of music. And a lot of times when I've got an idea, I'm like, hey, how about this? And they just say, oh, yeah, we know how, if that's you, we know how to play that. I mean, right. they bring so much to the whole thing. It's really, really something.
I'm getting all my products here. So, Bob, you know, I feel like we could do this for like 6 hours. I mean, you probably have things to do, but we didn't even scratch the surface of what there's a pandemic going on, you know? But we can't do it any longer because Instagram will punish us. So I just want to recommend to people that you get this record right here. It's backwards, but it's not backwards if you buy it. You know, there's an Aerosmith record from the mid 80s, Done with Mirrors. I remember I got it when I was 14.
Yeah.
And you remember that record?
Yep.
They thought it would be clever. All the typeset was backwards.
I remember. And
when I say that, it was like, even if you open up the liner notes and it was like all the credits, like in the lyric, all backwards. Like you know, oh, I get it. We're supposed to, you know, put it up against the mirror. But I was 14 years old. I didn't understand that was cocaine. I thought it was just, why did they do this? You could also, I'll probably just give this to Bob. It's an 8-track version that I think doesn't exist.
So
but
awesome.
This is $13.99.
That is so awesome. That's amazing.
Hey, I'm so, I really, all joking aside, you are a hero of so many of us, including me, and I'm so grateful that you spent the time with us. And I hope the next time we see each other is like in person, you know, and you're on stage scaring me again.
I hope so. And, you know, to everybody out there, please, the mask is good. The distance is good. Washing the hands is good. Voting is the best. We need to vote. Yes, we need to do some voting here, folks.
Dr. Fauci, my Dr. Fauci mug.
Awesome dude. That's who I'm listening to.
Well, let's stay safe and you know, maybe you'll get another record out of this thing, and we'll see you out on the road soon. So, Bob, thank you so much. Okay,
Geoff, it's been a wonderful time. Thank you so much.